London woke up to a mystery this morning, one that has already thrown the royal household into chaos. At the break of dawn, a new statue stood before Buckingham Palace. No ceremony, no authorization, no explanation. A bronze queen, arms crossed, gaze fixed toward the royal gates. And here's the shock. It wasn't Elizabeth. It wasn't Diana. It was Camilla. The Queen Consort herself, cast in metal, towering before the symbol of the monarchy. Within minutes, photos flooded social media, and Britain realized someone had rewritten royal history overnight. By 8 a.m., the words Camilla's statue were trending #1 on X and TikTok. Reporters flooded the palace gates. Cameras fought for angles through the black iron fences. The bronze face of the Queen Consort glinted under the pale light, chin raised, lips sealed, eyes staring directly at Buckingham's golden gates, the traditional resting place of monarchs long deceased. The BBC broke the story at 8:12, calling it an unprecedented act of royal defiance. Sky News described it as the most audacious display of self-iconography in modern monarchy. Even veteran palace correspondents admitted they'd never seen anything like it. There was no official schedule, no construction notice, not even a hint from the royal press office, said one insider. That statue didn't appear overnight by accident. Someone planned this. By mid-morning, the scene outside Buckingham had turned chaotic. Some onlookers brought flowers, kneeling as if before a new monarch. Others, clutching framed photos of Diana, placed them silently at the statue's base. One woman was heard whispering, "You can't replace her." Police set up temporary barriers as chants of "Diana forever" clashed with cries of "Long live Queen Camilla." From the palace, silence. No official comment, no royal statement, no word from King Charles. Reporters caught the palace spokesperson leaving his home at Notting Hill, face pale, refusing to answer a single question. That silence only intensified speculation. "It's the kind of quiet that makes the country hold its breath," said royal analyst Fiona Stokes. "Either this was an authorized royal art project, or we are watching a symbolic coup in real time." By noon, every major broadcaster had switched to rolling coverage. Helicopters hovered over the palace square. The Daily Mail's front page flashed across screens. Camilla's statue stuns Britain. On ITV's lunchtime panel, commentator James Hargreaves said, "In over a century, no living royal has ever placed their likeness before Buckingham. If this wasn't sanctioned by the king, it's an open challenge to his authority." Meanwhile, whispers began spreading through political circles. A senior Westminster aide, speaking off-record, said, "If the palace didn't approve it, that statue is illegal. You can't just install a monument on Crown land. Someone powerful must have signed something." Another insider close to Kensington added, "It wasn't Charles's idea, and it definitely wasn't William's." The shock extended beyond Britain's borders. CNN called it a thunderclap in the monarchy. Paris and New York tabloids ran the same question. Has Camilla declared her own legacy? By early afternoon, aerial footage revealed the inscription at the statue's base. "Queen Camilla, strength through silence." The phrase lit up online, dividing the nation. Some hailed it as feminist courage, others as blatant vanity. Social media users dug up old clips of Camilla at charity events, splicing them with images of Diana in the same spots, creating an instant digital war of symbols. Inside the royal circle, sources tell us that both William and Princess Anne were informed within the hour. One senior aide confirmed they spoke by phone almost immediately. Anne was furious, the source said. Her exact words were, "She's turned the gates of Buckingham into her mirror." Still, the king remained unseen. According to another insider, Charles had been scheduled for a private audience that morning, but abruptly cancelled all engagements. He watched the broadcast in silence, said the source, and when the camera zoomed on the bronze face, he put down his teacup and said, "This cannot be real." Outside, however, the crowds only grew. Journalists pushed against barricades, tourists live-streamed every angle, and drones filled the airspace above the palace. By 3 p.m., police declared the area under crowd control protocol, a move usually reserved for state funerals or national crises. Commentators now agree the statue is more than art. It's a statement, a claim to the monarchy's public image, said historian Martin Keane. Whoever authorized it wants to redefine the symbols of British royalty, starting with Camilla at the center. Oh? Tonight, as floodlights illuminate the bronze figure gleaming in the fog, one question dominates Britain's screens. Who commissioned the statue of Queen Camilla, and why now? Because in a kingdom built on silence, nothing shakes power more than a symbol no one was supposed to see. Just hours after Britain woke to that bronze shock, the hunt for answers began. And it's unfolding on two fronts. While journalists raced through the archives and royal staff scrambled to issue no comments, a quieter investigation had already started within the palace itself. According to insiders, Prince William and Princess Anne are personally seeking clarity over how the monument appeared without official sanction. Behind closed doors, that phrase, personally seeking clarity, is code for something far heavier, an internal probe. At the same time, investigative reporter Eleanor Shaw of The Guardian boarded a Eurostar to Paris, tracking a lead about the mysterious transport of a Royal Heritage sculpture container. French customs records showed it had arrived at Dover 2 weeks earlier, labelled under Cultural Import, Private Commission. The recipient, an unlisted art foundation with a single financial backer, a Monaco-based trust called Rosehill. In Montmartre, Shaw found the name Alexandre Morel, a sculptor once described by Le Figaro as the artist of power's shadows. Morel's previous work, memorials for politicians, private commissions for controversial figures, and a reputation for accepting discreet payments. He met her at his dusty studio, where half-finished busts lined the walls. His first words, "You came from London. Then you already know. She wanted eternity." Morel described how, 6 months ago, a woman identifying herself as an emissary of the Royal Cultural Council approached him with a proposal to craft a monument honouring the women of Britain's monarchy. It sounded official, even noble, but 3 weeks later, the brief changed. The new design, a single figure. The subject, Queen Camilla. "I asked if the palace approved," Morel recalled. She smiled and said, "History doesn't wait for permission." Meanwhile in London, palace sources say Anne and William spent that same evening reviewing financial logs from the Women's Legacy Foundation, one of Camilla's charities. "Anne has always been meticulous about funding," said one aide. She noticed an unexplained withdrawal of £4.2 million, marked as Heritage Renewal Grant, 2 weeks before the statue appeared. William reportedly cross-checked the foundation's transfer with a banking contact and found it matched a deposit made to Rosehill Trust in Monaco. If that link proves real, a former royal accountant told Sky News, then we're looking at the most serious breach of financial ethics in royal memory. It would mean a royal consort financed her own monument through a charitable fund. Late tonight, sources close to Kensington Palace confirmed that William and Anne are operating in quiet coordination. One insider described the siblings as united, methodical, and determined to find the truth before the tabloids do. Their calls, according to leaks, are short and cautious. Anne allegedly told him, "If she's using the monarchy's name to pay for herself, that's not art. That's treason of legacy." Back in Paris, Eleanor Shaw managed to obtain a copy of the payment slip for Morel's commission. The client listed, Rosehill Trust Limited. The signature, R. Ashcroft. That name rang alarm bells across London's media rooms. Sir Reginald Ashcroft, retired financial advisor to the Crown, long-time accountant for the Duchess of Cornwall before her coronation, had not been seen publicly in weeks. He resigned quietly last month, citing health reasons. Within hours, His name was trending online, alongside the tag number Rosehill Files. Commentators jumped in. "It's not the statue that's scandalous anymore," said ITV's royal correspondent Lila Benton. "It's the money behind it. If the funds trace back to Camilla's foundation, this could be a constitutional embarrassment." By mid-evening, The Guardian ran its first headline. "The Secret Commission. Was the Queen's statue privately financed?" The palace, once again, offered no comment. Inside the royal walls, however, movement was constant. One senior official described the atmosphere as controlled panic. Charles remained unseen, but reportedly ordered a full internal audit. Aides spoke of William visiting his father late at night for what they called a quiet, début décisif conversation. Outside, floodlights still washed over the bronze figure. The statue's expression, proud, cold, unblinking, seemed to challenge the chaos it had unleashed. Tourists continued to take photos, unaware they were standing at the heart of a possible royal financial scandal. By the next morning, opinion columns filled with speculation. Was this a feminist statement gone wrong, or a deliberate act of defiance? Could Camilla have orchestrated the project entirely in secret? A palace insider told The Times, "Her Majesty is no fool. Every move is calculated. If she wanted a statue, she knew exactly what message it would send." But William's camp offered a different tone. "Symbols don't frighten us," said a close associate. "Deceit does." As Britain watches, two investigations now race toward the same truth, one by the press, one from within the royal bloodline itself. And tonight, under the relentless glare of television lights and online scrutiny, a single question echoes through Westminster and Windsor alike. Was the Queen Consort's monument a tribute to women's legacy, or the most audacious self-portrait in royal history? By the following morning, the palace gates looked more like a crime scene than a royal landmark. Police officers kept reporters back as technicians scanned the base of the Camilla statue for official approval markings. There were none. The atmosphere in London was thick with speculation and the weight of something bigger than art. Inside the royal compound, phones rang without pause. According to multiple palace sources, William and Princess Anne had by then established a confidential review team, 2 aides, 1 retired accountant, and a discreet lawyer known for handling royal controversies. Their task: trace every transaction connected to the so-called Rosehill Trust. "It's not just about money," one insider told The Telegraph. "It's about credibility. The monarchy lives and dies by trust." That trust was eroding fast. The Guardian published a follow-up headlined, "The Rosehill Mystery. Millions Missing from Camilla's Charity Fund." The piece linked the Women's Legacy Foundation to a sequence of offshore transfers stretching from London to Monaco and then to a small Parisian studio, the same address Eleanor Shaw had visited days earlier. In Westminster, members of Parliament called for transparent clarification. A Labour MP publicly questioned whether the Charity Commission should intervene. If funds earmarked for women's welfare were used for self-promotion, that is not merely unethical, it's scandalous, she said on record. For the royal family, the pressure was unbearable. By noon, an emergency meeting was convened at Clarence House. Charles, according to an aide, was visibly strained, clutching a folder of press clippings. "He didn't shout," the source said. "He just kept repeating, 'How could she do this without telling me?'" William presented the early findings of his internal audit, a simple spreadsheet showing the path of £4.2 million through 3 shell companies. Beside him, Anne kept silent but firm, occasionally interjecting to clarify dates and names. "Anne is the memory of the institution," one courtier commented later. "She knows who signs what and when." Catherine was also present, though she spoke little. Observers said she looked weary, glancing at the newsfeed on her phone. Live footage of the crowd still gathered outside Buckingham, half chanting Camilla's name, half calling her a fraud. "She doesn't deserve this," Catherine reportedly murmured. Whether she meant the Queen or the monarchy itself, no one could tell. Then came the moment everyone feared. Charles asked bluntly, "Is the money traceable to her?" William hesitated, then nodded once. "Through the Rosehill account," he said quietly. The room fell silent. For a man who had spent his reign trying to modernize the image of the crown, this was the kind of crisis that could undo decades of effort. Sources say Anne was the first to break the silence. "Father," she said, "if we protect her now, we'll lose the people later." Her words, though calm, carried the tone of finality. Outside, the media frenzy intensified. BBC analysts compared the event to the abdication crisis of 1936, not in power, but in perception. The Daily Mail front page that afternoon screamed, "Royal reckoning, who will fall?" Back in Paris, Eleanor Shaw received another tip. An anonymous email attachment, one scanned memo titled Women's Legacy Reallocation Proposal. The document bore the initials CR at the bottom. Analysts immediately speculated it stood for Camilla Regina, Queen Camilla's royal cipher. When confronted by reporters later that day, a palace representative repeated the same three words. No official comment. That silence, once again, spoke louder than any denial. By early evening, the statue had become a rallying point for division. Protesters gathered at the gates, carrying signs that read "Justice for Diana" and "Legacy, not vanity." Meanwhile, small groups of Camilla's supporters argued that a woman's ambition should not be vilified. "If men can build monuments to themselves," one activist said to Sky News, "why can't she?" The debate grew beyond the statue. It became a national conversation about power, gender, and memory. Was Camilla's act a rebellion against tradition or a betrayal of it? Was it the mark of confidence or insecurity? Inside the palace, a new term began circulating among staff: the Rosehill Files. The phrase referred to every email, transfer, and signature connected to the statue. According to a source close to the investigation, Anne had taken personal control of the records. "She's doing this for the institution, not for revenge," the source explained. But make no mistake, she intends to expose the truth. Late that night, William was seen leaving Clarence House alone, face expressionless under the flashlights of waiting photographers. "No comment tonight, gentlemen," he said briefly before entering his car. Cameras captured him staring out the window as he drove away, the heir to the throne now acting as investigator, son, and reluctant judge. Meanwhile, the statue remained standing under the floodlights, bronze glinting against the drizzle. It had no voice, but somehow it had forced the entire kingdom to speak. Tomorrow, the palace is expected to meet again. And as Britain holds its breath, one question echoes from newsroom to parliament to every home watching the drama unfold. Will the Queen Consort be remembered for her service, or for the statue that brought the monarchy to its knees? By the third day, the storm had moved from speculation to confrontation. The statue still loomed over Buckingham's gates, its metallic stare cutting through London's fog like a silent accusation. Overnight, reporters described the scene as a monument under siege. Barriers now surrounded the square, security tightened, and behind those heavy palace doors, the family gathered. According to multiple insiders, King Charles called a private emergency session at Clarence House. The invitation list was short: William, Anne, and Catherine. Camilla would be the last to arrive. The mood, one aide described, was like thunder before a downpour. William entered first, folder in hand. The air smelled faintly of rain and tension. Anne stood by the window, arms crossed, her face unreadable. Catherine sat quietly beside her husband, clutching a sheaf of morning headlines. The Queen's statue scandal deepens. Palace funds under fire. Charles appeared pale, older than his years. "We must end this," he said softly, "before the crown itself is dragged into the mud." Moments later, the door opened. Camilla stepped in. No jewels, no entourage, just a navy dress, a cold gaze, and the confidence of a woman who refused to flinch. She took her seat opposite the king, hands clasped. "Let's not pretend you didn't know this was coming," she said evenly. The room froze. "Do you understand what you've done?" Charles asked, voice shaking. "I've made history look at me," Camilla replied. "That's all I've ever wanted." William pushed forward the folder. "You've used charity money, funds meant for education and rehabilitation, to commission your own statue, through Rosehill Trust." Camilla's eyes narrowed. "It was my initiative, yes, but not theft. Legacy work deserves investment." "Legacy?" Anne snapped. "You turned compassion into currency. Do you realize what this means for all of us?" Camilla leaned back, expression unyielding. "People remember those who refused to disappear. Elizabeth had a crown. Diana had their hearts. I have nothing but silence." And I made the silence speak. Catherine, who had stayed quiet, finally spoke. Her voice trembled. "A statue doesn't make the world remember you, Ma'am. It makes them debate you. There's a difference." For a long moment, no one said a word. Only the faint ticking of the clock echoed through the chamber. Charles rubbed his temples. "This family has survived scandal, war, and grief," he murmured. "But not betrayal from within." Camilla stood. "Betrayal," she said, almost whispering. "I've stood beside you through every humiliation. I've been cursed, laughed at, branded a villain, and yet when I dare to claim my place, you call it treason." Anne's voice cut through the air. "You didn't claim a place, Camilla. You built a monument over someone else's grave." The words landed like a strike. Camilla's face stiffened, her breath sharp. For a brief second, something flickered, anger or pain, before she masked it again. "So this is my trial," she said, looking around. "Family judging family." William looked straight at her. "No, this is the monarchy protecting itself." Charles rose slowly. "This must stop," he declared. "By tomorrow morning, that statue will be covered, and your public duties suspended until further notice." Camilla's lips parted, as if to argue, but no sound came. She stared at the king, her husband, and then at the folder on the table. The printed words, "Rosehill Trust Investigation," seemed to glow under the lamp. "I see," she said finally, her tone brittle but calm. "You'll all get your purity. The newspapers will call it reform, but history will remember who was erased." She turned to leave. For a moment, even Anne softened. Catherine lowered her eyes. Only William remained still, his jaw clenched. As the door closed behind Camilla, Charles sank back into his chair, whispering to no one in particular, "We've lost her." Anne answered quietly, "No, Father. She lost us." Outside, the rain began to fall again, soaking the cloth that now covered the statue's face. Underneath, the bronze queen waited in silence, as if still watching. That night, the BBC aired a special report titled "The Fall of Camilla, a Family Divided." Analysts called it a defining crisis for a modern monarchy. For the public, the question shifted from curiosity to judgment. Was Camilla a rebel against an outdated system, or the embodiment of the pride that could break it? And as London's lights reflected off the rain-slick streets, Buckingham stood quiet, not in peace, but in shock. Because in the heart of Britain's most guarded palace, the real war had just been fought, and no one had truly won. At sunrise, the square outside Buckingham looked like a battlefield after the noise, barricades dismantled, flowers strewn across wet pavement, camera vans idling in silence. The statue of Queen Camilla now stood draped in thick black fabric, its proud silhouette reduced to a dark shape against the pale London sky. Reporters called it the funeral of a living queen. Crowds still came, despite the rain. Some bowed their heads, others shouted at the shrouded figure. "Take it down!" one man yelled. "She deserves better," answered a woman nearby. The chants mingled with the hum of generators and the steady clicks of photographers capturing what had become the defining image of the monarchy's latest crisis. Inside Clarence House, the mood was equally somber. Charles was nowhere to be seen, retreating behind locked doors since last night's confrontation. Anne had already issued orders to palace staff. The dismantling will begin by noon. William, according to aides, stayed awake until dawn, finalizing the statement to be read to the press. It was brief, exactly 42 words, confirming the suspension of Queen Camilla's public duties and the temporary removal of the statue pending investigation. When the statement aired live on BBC One, the country fell into an uneasy silence. The words were delivered with the tone of a royal obituary. The broadcast cut between shots of the covered statue and images of Camilla leaving Buckingham in a grey coat, her car surrounded by flashing lights. No ceremony, no farewell, only the echo of the engine fading down the mall. Political commentators called it a controlled collapse. The palace, they said, had chosen dignity over drama, but the damage was done. You can't erase an image once it's burned into public memory, noted historian Martin Keane on ITV. That statue may be gone by nightfall, but its shadow will haunt this monarchy for decades. By early afternoon, construction crews arrived under discreet police escort. Cameras captured the first clangs of metal against metal as workers began dismantling the bronze figure piece by piece. Each thud sounded heavier than the last. The rain thickened, as if trying to wash the story away, but the sound carried, echoing off the palace walls. From a window above, Catherine watched quietly. Aides described her as visibly shaken. When one attendant asked if she was all right, she simply said, "It feels like watching history fold itself up." Outside, protesters held up signs, "Justice for Diana," "Legacy, not vanity." A few loyalists still stood by the statue's remains, holding banners reading, "Stand with Camilla." The divide in the crowd reflected the same fracture within the royal household. One voice cried out, "They've buried her alive." Another shot back, "She did it to herself." At 3:47 p.m., the statue's head was lifted by crane. The cloth slipped briefly, revealing the bronze face, expressionless, rain streaming down like tears, before it vanished into the back of a covered truck. The BBC replayed the moment in slow motion, the anchor whispering, "The end of an extraordinary chapter in royal history." As the trucks rolled away, an observer from The Guardian described the scene, "It wasn't demolition, it was exorcism." Back inside, a small group gathered in Charles's private study, Anne, William, Catherine. The king remained standing by the fireplace, his face unreadable. "It's done," he said. "Let the silence mend what noise has broken." Anne replied quietly, "Silence built this palace, father." But silence also broke it. That evening, the palace issued a final statement thanking the public for their patience and understanding. The phrase was repeated across networks but failed to calm the conversation. Social media erupted again, half mourning, half celebrating. One viral post read, "She came to be remembered, and now she will never be forgotten." As darkness fell, the square outside Buckingham was empty, except for puddles and footprints. The spot where the statue once stood was marked only by a shallow indentation in the stone, ringed with wilted flowers and a few handwritten notes. One read, "For all her faults, she dared." Another, "History will decide." When asked by reporters that night whether the monarchy had survived the crisis, a palace insider answered with weary honesty, "The monarchy always survives, but people never look at it quite the same way again." And across the capital, as news anchors replayed the footage of the covered statue for the last time, Britain was left with one simple, unanswerable question. Was Queen Camilla a victim of her own ambition, or a warning of what happens when power and pride become one and the same? A week after the statue came down, London had returned to its usual rhythm, or so it seemed. The barricades were gone, the tourists back, the square polished clean, but if you looked closely, a faint outline still marked the stone where the bronze pedestal once stood, a shadow that refused to fade. The official narrative was tidy. The royal family had moved forward. Camilla was now in private retreat, reportedly at a countryside residence in Wiltshire. The palace confirmed that a full audit of the Women's Legacy Foundation and Rosehill Trust was underway. Behind the polished phrasing, the damage lingered. On the first Monday after the scandal, the nation watched as the king appeared publicly for the first time in weeks, flanked by William, Catherine, and Anne, to inaugurate the new Diana Rose Garden at Kensington. It was a ceremony designed for healing, a sea of white roses, an orchestra playing soft strings, the gentle promise of continuity. Catherine placed a single bloom before a plaque inscribed with the words, "Compassion is our crown." The cameras caught a flash of emotion on her face, quickly hidden by a composed smile. William spoke briefly, his voice steady but weighted. "Legacy is not what we build for ourselves, but what we preserve for others." The audience applauded. The moment felt sincere, but everyone watching knew what it was really about. The message was clear. Diana's memory had reclaimed the public heart, and the new generation had restored moral order. Camilla's name was absent from every official statement. Meanwhile, inside the palace, Anne was working quietly but relentlessly. A senior courtier confirmed she had taken direct control of the audit's second phase, a detailed review of every royal trust and foundation. "Her Majesty's sister is ensuring this can never happen again," the aide told the Telegraph. "She's cleaning the blood from the marble." When asked whether the findings would be made public, the spokesperson replied, "In due time." The phrase sparked debate. Transparency had become the new currency of loyalty. Across the channel, journalist Eleanor Shaw published her final piece in The Guardian, "The Woman Who Forced History to Look." It traced the 6-month journey from a quiet art studio in Paris to the scandal that shook the crown. The article ended not with blame, but with reflection. History remembers the bold, but not always kindly. In the end, every monument is a confession of what we feared most to lose. For days, the article dominated the headlines. Talk shows dissected every sentence. Podcasts turned the story into a modern parable. Camilla's defenders called her a symbol of feminine defiance. Critics branded her a monument to pride. At Westminster, the Prime Minister declined to comment on royal affairs, but praised the palace's swift response. Opposition MPs demanded a parliamentary review of charitable oversight laws. Once again, the monarchy had become a mirror for Britain itself, admired, questioned, impossible to ignore. In Wiltshire, the woman at the centre of it all remained unseen. Locals near the estate spoke of lights burning late at night, of a single figure walking the gardens. "She doesn't look defeated," one villager told ITV. "More defiant, like someone waiting for history to change its mind." That image quickly spread online. For a brief moment, the internet turned soft, sympathy replacing mockery. But the warmth faded as quickly as it came. By week's end, Camilla's name was again a headline of controversy, not compassion. Within the palace, Charles moved through official duties like a man carrying invisible weight. "He speaks less, works more," an aide said. But something inside him has gone quiet. Those close to the king say he has not spoken privately to Camilla since the night of the confrontation. "He reads her letters," one source whispered, "but never replies." Then, quietly, another story began to circulate. During the removal of the statue, a worker had discovered a small engraving beneath the base, invisible to the public eye. The words, "They will look up to me." It was confirmed days later by the construction team. The palace declined to comment. The line reignited debate across media panels. "It's either arrogance or prophecy," said historian Lila Benton on Sky News. Perhaps both, because in the end, the country is still looking up, not at her face, but at what she represents. By the second weekend, the Diana Rose Garden opened fully to the public. Families wandered the paths, taking photographs where white roses bloomed against the autumn fog. At the garden's centre, a small plaque bore Diana's silhouette, her smile eternal, her gaze serene. A few visitors left fresh bouquets. Others whispered prayers. And yet, at the edge of the crowd, someone had placed a single bronze flower, reporters noticed. They photographed it, zoomed in on the stem, the faintly etched initials, C.R. No one claimed responsibility. The object was quietly removed before nightfall. That evening, the BBC closed its weekend coverage with a reflective broadcast titled Legacy and the Shadow. The presenter's voice carried the measured calm of finality. For over 1,000 years, the British monarchy has lived by its symbols, crowns, portraits, and statues. But perhaps no image has tested it more than the one that rose without permission before Buckingham Palace. The statue is gone, yet the question remains, what does legacy truly mean in a house built on memory? As the segment ended, the screen faded to a shot of Buckingham Square at dawn, empty, quiet, washed clean by rain. A child passed by, tugging at her mother's sleeve. "Mummy," she asked, "who used to stand there?" Her mother paused, looking at the blank stone. "Someone who wanted to be remembered," she answered softly. The camera lingered on the empty pedestal, the morning sun breaking through thin clouds, the echo of the question still hanging in the air. And the voice of the presenter returned one last time, calm and resonant, leaving viewers in silence. Power builds monuments, but legacy decides who truly stands. Will history remember Queen Camilla as the woman who challenged tradition, or as the warning carved in bronze for all who follow? The broadcast faded out. The question remained,